You're listening to Gen XP. Let's play some games.
Hi friends, thanks for listening to our stories. I wanted to take a moment to remind you that we do offer exclusive access to content, behind-the-scenes interviews, candid pictures, props, and homebrew rules in addition to official art and our Discord channel where we interact with our followers. If this sounds like your sort of fun, please consider subscribing. You can find us at patreon.com/GenXP. We truly appreciate your support, and thank you once again for listening. Previously on the Shattered World of Voar, Theric and Avo agreed to work for a strange man they met in the woods and venture back into the cursed town of Pendleton. Captain Fairfax needed a lockbox from the town hall and agreed to help the duo end the darkness that hung on the abandoned town. Cannon fire, zombie attacks, a heroic leap through a boarded-up window, and several scrapes and bruises later, we ended upon the deck of the airship the Lonely Horizon, as it sailed away from a maelstrom devouring the village. Beaten and battered, the two friends turned over their hard-earned loot to the captain and were shown to a bunk where they took their rest and wondered what would be coming next for them. Welcome back to the Shattered World of Voar.
Avo and Theric, you spend the night in the forward hold of the Lonely Horizon in a very small room, large enough for Theric to stand up in, though not quite so for Avo. There are a couple of hammocks strung up in here. There's a bag and a chest for perhaps its previous occupants. But after arriving on the Lonely Horizon, you were given a friendly clap on the back. You were told good job and shown to a room to rest, recuperate, lick your wounds, and recover from the day the day that you had in Pendleton. Getting kind of beaten bloody. The night, unless, would you have just kind of bedded down and gotten some sleep, or do you have anything that you want to do when you're given some time alone in this room?
Feel it could use some rest, so I think I'd be going right to it, even though the quarters are kind of cramped. But...
Yeah, they are small for you. What about you, Theric?
Oh, I explore the quarters. I walk around.
Inside the small room?
Yeah.
Okay. So as I said, there's two hammocks. There are a couple, looks like somebody at one point took a knife and carved a little bit on one wall. Just looks like a simple game, almost like what we would consider like a tic-tac-toe game. And then there's that bag that's kind of flopped over on one end of the room and a small chest on the other. And then there's the door that leaves this room.
Is there anything in the bag in the chest?
So you start rifling through the bag. The bag itself has... looks like a bandana, like a scarf that you could wear over your head. It's got a small pouch of pipe tobacco and a carving knife in the bag. Looks to be whoever this was, that was their worldly possessions. And then when you check the chest has one very bent silver piece in it that looks like something heavy fell on it at one point. It's kind of bent almost in half. And in addition to that, it's got a cracked little crystal vial that doesn't have a cork and doesn't have anything inside of it, but it is cracked. You don't think it would even hold liquid if you were to pour that in there. That's all that you find in the inside the room.
Put the silver piece in the vial, or in the bag. Look at Avo. Want any booty?
Good, thanks.
Put the bag down.
Okay. And you can hear outside the door, you can hear people kind of moving about. You hear some muffled conversation here and there. And in your time on the Lonely Horizon, in addition to seeing Captain Fairfax, Devereaux brought you to the room. You did see Hillman, the woman with the crossbow. She was up in the rigging of the ship, kind of keeping an eye on things. And there were a scattering of other people. You actually saw a half-elf, you saw a human, and a couple halflings. and you can hear like general like bumping and thumping of people moving things around, conversations, a couple laughs every once in a while. But you are left to your own devices, at least for that evening. At some point, I imagine, Theric, unless you're going to leave the room, you decide to bed down for the evening?
Yes.
Okay. So the two of you finally get some sleep, get a little bit of rest, feel a little bit rejuvenated, wake up the next day, still a little bruised, but feeling a little bit more confident for having gone on the adventure of Pendleton. And I'd say maybe 10 to 15 minutes after you've woken and started to rouse yourself, making sure your armor's strapped properly, Avo, checking your weapons. Avo, you were never relieved of the possession of that rapier, so it's still in your possession. It's still on your side. But after 10 or 15 minutes, there's a knock on the door, like a light knock.
Hello?
The door is kind of flung open when you say hello, in a kind of a rough manner, and you see two female halflings. You saw them yesterday, but you didn't really get a solid look at them. You were kind of being ushered along. But you see two female halflings standing in the door of the room that would be the right size for them as well. And you see, like, one of them has, like, short, kind of cropped hair. The other one has hair in, like, pigtails that stick straight out from her head. They're both, like, heavily freckled and a little bit dirty on their cheeks. And they're wearing kind of very rough-looking clothing that has been sewn and patched and kind of held together by care more than or by maintenance more than care. They each have daggers on their belts, and just on your passive perceptions, you guys can tell that there are a couple of hidden weapons on their person in other places that are not fully visible. You can see small, bulges of knives here and there, maybe a dart. But they're just kind of... They open the door, they knocked, they open the door hard, it kind of slams open, and then they just stand there giving you very intent looks, each of you, kind of like looking you up and down, but they say nothing.
Apologies, did we accidentally get your room?
I take the bag and I throw it in. I go, you want this?
The one on the right catches it. They look at each other. They mumble in a language that neither of you speak. And then the one that caught the bag says, "It's not ours. This not our room, but Captain want you..." And she throws the bag back in the room. She says, "Captain want you for breakfast." And then they look at each other and they kind of chuckle. "No, Captain..." And then they kind of talk in that language again.
I wouldn't taste good for breakfast.
They talk in that language again that you don't quite understand. And when you say that, there's a lot of like giggling laughter. And then they turn back, and the one who hasn't spoken yet says, No, my sister mean, Captain want you join for breakfast."
Oh, well, okay. I can do that.
And then there's like, they look at each other, there's a little bit of like nods and winks, and then they kind of like point at Avaleth, and then kind of like nod, and then they turn and walk away without any more ceremony.
I suppose I'll slide out of this room and straighten myself up.
You see them as they turn and walk away. So this room does open into another bedroom, which looks like maybe for crew members who've been here a little bit longer, or who have been appointed with slightly better positions to sleep in. But they immediately start climbing the ladder up onto the deck. And you do see in that room there is a half-orc that is in the room just outside of yours, who's in his hammock, and he looks like he's kind of lacing up some boots. He's got a saber that's kind of sitting on the floor next to him, looks ready to be belted on. And he sees as you step out and kind of stretch, Avaleth, and get your back straightened up for the first time in a few hours other than laying in the hammock. The half-orc kind of looks at you and he goes, "Don't mind them. They're all sorts of creepy most of the time, but, they're... I wouldn't say they're harmless, but you'll get used to it if you stick around."
Thanks.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. You know where you're going to get to the captain's quarters? Just below his perch there. There should be a door.
So up on deck.
Yep, up on deck.
Once again, thanks.
So he stands up and starts belting his saber on. The two of you leave the room. Are you leaving the bag and the chest in there, Theric?
No, I take the bag.
Okay.
I'll leave the chest in there.
Okay.
But I take the bag and I throw it over my shoulder.
Sure. The two of you leave your room, climb up the ladder and onto the deck, and for the first time ever of either of you that you can remember, no, that's not true. Avo, not since military, since you had joined the military. First time ever for you, Theric. You stand on the prow of a ship, on the deck of an airship, and see no land anywhere within sight. It is just open blue sky and clouds. And I think, Theric, there is that moment where your curiosity is you're drawn to look over the edge. Would you bow to that curiosity?
I look around, eyes wide, walk over, look over the edge.
Yep. And so the prow of the deck of the Lonely Horizon is in a little shadow because there are the large air balloons above it. Not that those are what hold it up, but they do provide some mobility to the ship. You know that the ship itself is held aloft by magic. You don't know where that magic is located on the ship, but you know the only way the ship of this size could be held aloft is by an umbra-like crystal somewhere. Theric, you move over to the edge of the deck and look down and realize you are looking roughly a mile to 2 miles of just straight down with no land before you see just in the very distance, far below you, the roiling gray clouds of the Tempest.
Avo, we've been kidnapped.
Willingly.
On the deck, you hear people kind of moving around. You see a human man kind of carrying a box. It comes up out of the one hold, moves over, and it's got like some tools in it. Looks like he's fixing part of the railing, just kind of sanding things down, shaving down a splinter. You see, it looks like at some point the ship must have got low enough, but there is claw marks on one part of the ship that were very reminiscent to what you saw when you were in Pendleton. But he looks like he's just sanding those down and repairing that. You do see Devereaux up on the captain's deck at the wheel. And he just kind of looks to each of you, gives you a nod, and then he just points below as he's just kind of watching the horizon.
I'll nod back and head to the door.
Okay. On the way there, you do cross the deck. In the center of the deck, there is you would have thought it was a hold, like for cargo, but this only goes down about 4.5 feet. And you realize this is a subdeck that is above the layer where you were sleeping, but below the main deck. And this is where the cannons are apparently located. And as you happen to look down, crossing that little subdeck about 4.5 feet down, you see a black-haired, green-skinned, small person. You don't get a solid look. You know that she has kind of long black hair, kind of tied back, long pointed ears, and a kind of large nose. Kind of walks across the hole as you're walking past. The two of you cross the deck, and underneath the captain's quarters and behind one of the stairs that come down from the quarters, there is a well-appointed door with a window and some drapes in it. And you believe you are at the captain's quarters. Would you knock? Would you just go in? How would you approach this situation?
Well, the captain's up above us, right?
No,
it's
Devereaux
first
is
mate.
up top. He's the first mate.
Oh.
And he pointed below him to where you're supposed to be. Yep. You hear Captain Fairfax's voice, kind of rich, deeper voice. He says, "Come on in. Breakfast is ready."
You're apparently in the lead.
Throw the door open.
Yep, you push the door open. It's well oiled, doesn't squeak. Inside the captain's quarters, there is a level of luxury that you would expect from the captain of a ship, of a successful ship at least. There's fine drapes. There's looks like a covered bed on one side of the room, and his room is as wide as the ship, and it's a good-sized room. High ceilings so that you can stand and relax comfortably. There's even a chandelier in here. There is also a table near the front corner of the room with a black piece of like silk laying over top of it, and you can each hear as you step into the room, other than like the flow of wind past you and the mumble and kind of general hum of the crew outside, the occasional creaking of the ship. As you step into that room and the door gently closes behind you, that table gives off a very light hum. Just a... Captain Fairfax is sitting in the center of the room at a dining table in front of a desk. It looks like this is something that the table might not always be here, but it looks like he has it set up at least for this meal. And for you as guests. There are 2 chairs that have been placed there, one on either side of the table, and then he sits at the head of the table. And he says, Masters Avo and Theric, please join me. It's nice to see you this morning. You're looking a little bit more healthy than yesterday. Have a seat. Food's still warm. Been waiting for you to join me this morning.
I'll have a seat.
I'll sit down and I'll be like, I don't know who these belong to, but I don't know if they have family or if, I mean, they're just not mine. Not in the mood for a bandana, although it probably would look really cool. Can I put the bag down? They were in the room you put us in.
Oh, yes. Wallace and Dearborn. They were good men, and their families... I've already made arrangements to make sure that their families are taken care of. Actually, Wallace's family. Dearborn had no family. He was an orphan. But you're welcome to whatever you find in the room, or it can be tossed of no regard. But I have to say, well done on yesterday's adventure. For a couple of fellas that I found in the woods claiming to be explorers, you handled yourself more like an adventurer. So I appreciate that, and you see he glances back towards his desk. He says it's going to be a nice payday once we find some place to sell everything.
Yeah. I'm curious, where are we headed?
Well, that was a question I had for you. We're about a few hours off the coast of Nova Sona still. I haven't absconded with you too far without your permission, of course. See, that's not really my style. I wanted to have a discussion with you to find out what your intents were. If you want to come with me, I can use competent crew members. As I mentioned, Wallace and Dearborn were good fellas, but I don't think they were quite on the level of what I saw you guys accomplish yesterday. I'd be happy to pay you as part of the crew and maybe teach you a few things if you're interested. Or, if you're not interested, I can sail into Nova Sona as a legitimate trader, drop you off, maybe resupply a little bit, and make my way. So, wanted to give you the option this morning, and he kind of points at breakfast, which is really like some fruits. There's looks like some roasted venison. There's a few different things that are on there that might not be standard breakfast fare, but it's good food. And you've been eating for the most part rations for the last couple of days. So he says, I wanted to give you a decent meal and make an offer. I can either pay you for your time, drop you off in Nova Sona and let you go about your business, or you can come with me and maybe see some of the world.
I am curious to see more of the world, but what kind of work would you have us be doing?
Well, we are... let's say that we're a type of merchant. We don't follow the rules of most any society. We follow our own rules for the most part. And there's all manner of people out there that need things from fresh water, meat, vegetables, fruits, minerals, relics, and we acquire things and go to places where they're for sale or where they're being bought, and we make money off of doing that. So the lockbox that you recovered for me has a couple maps in it that I was looking for. It also has a few pieces of a rare mineral that is useful to a number of people, and I have a buyer for that. We came to Nova Sona for the box. The stone that you recovered out of the well, that was not part of the plan, but I know where I can sell that. That's the cost that I mentioned. That's it's going to cost me to sell it, but I'll make something off of it as well.
If it's going to cost you, then how are you actually selling it?
Yes and no. I'm selling it for probably information more than coin. And it's going to cost me coin to get where I have to be to sell it, if that makes any sense. Without knowing what your plans are, I don't want to really tip my hand too much. I'm sure you understand. But dig in, and he starts to fill a plate with fruits and cheeses, and rips off a hunk of bread and pours himself a large glass of mead, and then pushes it across the table to you. What do you think, fellas? Do you want to see the world? You want to become members of a airship crew? Learn a thing about the world and the ways of it? Or nothing wrong with Nova Sona. I've been there a number of times. Very nice people. They've got very nice city. Lots of taxes. Lots of rules.
I'm on board for a trial basis.
Oh, yeah. You can leave anytime you want to. What about you, Master Theric?
What about me? I'm enjoying breakfast.
I'm glad you are. I don't see many of your kind here. How did you come to find yourself on the island of Nova Sona?
Just lucky, I guess.
It is a lucky place. That island is one of the largest islands that I've ever come across. I've sailed this world for a couple decades now, and Nova Sona it's gigantic compared to most places, and its level of resources is truly staggering, and fresh water.
How do you find your way from somewhere else to Nova Sona?
Well, that's an interesting question. Let me give you a little bit of a tour. And he stands up and he motions to you, Theric, but he walks over to that table with the sheet on it, and he pulls it off, and you see a octagonal table with a dome of crystal on it. The crystal itself is imagine about 2 to 3 feet across and about 8 to 9 inches deep at its center, of umbrelite crystal mounted to this desk. And it as he takes the sheet off, it kind of hums, and there's a little bit of a glow, and you can see some little magical energy kind of tracing along its edge, just almost never stopping, just little hums and whispers of energy here and there. He says, well, I'm sure you fellas know how airships work, as far as you must have an umbrelite crystal in order to hold it in the sky. But the crystal itself also acts as a bit of a lodestone or a compass, and if you know how to use this, and you know where another one is, somewhere out there in the world, you can navigate here and there. You can also just sail blindly into the drift and hope to find something, and I've done that once or twice, but Nova Sona, for example, a lot of people that live there don't know, but there's a cave below the castle with a large umbrelite crystal that kind of drips into a pond down there, and if you spend a little bit of time near one, And then you have one of these, and he kind of very reverently lays his hand on the one on his table. He says, if you spend a little bit of time near one umbrelite crystal, and then you have one of these, you can usually find your way back and forth.
I look at the magical table. What's one of these?
This is an umbrelite compass. This is the umbrelite heart of the ship, but it's also its compass. So this, and you notice that the table itself can't be moved. The table itself is built into the ship. It is not on legs. It is part of the ship that extends up and holds this crystal. And it doesn't. There are no moving parts. There are runes carved all the way around the table, but no moving parts. It's just this large dome of crystal that hums and vibrates with magical energy.
I look in the dome. Is there any needle or any way to?
There is. So you kind of, for you to look into it, you kind of hover up because it's a little bit higher than what you can look into. But you hover up a little bit. Your wings kind of buzz, and you lean over and look deep into the dome, and you can see inside of the crystal like this swirl. It almost looks like clouds. It reminds you of when you glanced over the edge of the ship down to the Tempest. There's almost like a swirl of energy in there. And you don't see anything that would point you one direction or not. Captain Fairfax, standing next to you, he kind of looks to you and he puts his hand on the crystal, on the umbrelite crystal, and there is a moment, like a little pulse that you, being as close as you are there, you feel it in your fingertips, almost like you touched almost like a cactus or something, almost prickly. Doesn't hurt, like you came too close to touching something. It kind of buzzes and prickles at the ends of your fingertips. But you see that energy swirl a little bit inside the crystal, and then you see it's kind of like at an angle off to your right, but like the mist inside the crystal kind of parts, and it seems to be very specifically leading in one direction. And he says, this is just, you seemed interested, Master Theric, so this points back in the direction of my home, someplace that I'm from. And if you know how to use one of these and spend enough time around them, you can go anywhere you'd like.
You could make it point whichever way you want it to point.
I can make it point any place I've been before, any place that I've got a...
Guided by thought?
To a certain extent, yes. And practice. It takes a little bit of know-how to successfully navigate on one of these ships.
Interesting.
He says, you're welcome to look and touch as much as you like. It's fairly hardy, though it won't respond to you at the moment. But he wanders back over and sits down at the table and picks up he kind of spears a couple grapes with a fork and starts eating them, just kind of watching the two of you.
I start poking different rooms, seeing if anything will happen.
Give me an Arcana check.
I just want to walk over and put my hand on it.
Okay. You feel that same thing, like when you touched it. It's still, even though he took his hand off, when you're standing up at your height, Avaleth, you can look down and see that there is like a swirl of clouds, but they've been parted, like something dragged through those clouds in a certain direction. And as you put your hand on it, you feel that same like tingling energy in your fingertips. It doesn't seem hostile in any way. It's just unusual. And you have advantage on Arcana.
Mm-hmm. 21.
So, Avaleth, you spend a few moments there, kind of your fingers tracing over different parts of the runes, different geometric configurations, and you get to a point where you're like, there are runes that represent nearly every school of magic here. The only runes that are, for the most part, absent are necromantic runes. But there are runes that represent nearly all aspects of every school of magic, including divine aspects. And Captain Fairfax is just kind of sitting over at the table watching the two of you look at the umbrelite compass.
I'll go have some more to eat.
So tell me, while on Nova Sona, what was your job there? Were you a farmer, a hunter, a baker? What did you do on Nova Sona?
I was an acolyte at the church.
An acolyte at the church. Oh, at the Dawning Garden.
Yes.
Interesting. You're a religious man.
You could say that.
And you, Master Theric? What did you do on Nova Sona?
Oh, I was, I was a vagrant.
A vagrant. I've been one of those before. It's an interesting life. And then the two of you, longtime friends?
We knew each other when we were young.
It's been a while.
We were separated for a while. We just met back up not too long ago.
Met back up and then wandered off into the wilderness. As explorers.
That's how it works.
That is sometimes how it works. There is a knock at the door, and Captain Fairfax looks up and he says, "Come." And you see Devereaux's kind of shaved head, wide mouth, wide chin kind of lean in, and he says, "Captain, we're still about 20, 30 miles outside of the range of the Sparrowhawk Brigade, but Hillman saw something moving with the spyglass not too long ago. It might have been a patrol." Captain Fairfax kind of nods. He says, "Thank you, Devereaux. I don't think we're breaking any laws hovering out here in the drift, so let's maintain our position, and if anything comes closer, let me know." He says, "Aye, Captain." And he closes the door, and you hear his feet kind of boot steps heading back up the stairs to above the room that you're sitting in. So what do you think?
How far is your next destination?
Well, it's going to be about a week of sailing in order to get there. If you're joining the crew, if you're interested in going, I can let you know that I will pay all of my crew. Any sailor on my crew gets 1 gold piece a week. And any haul that we take, and he does hook a thumb back over towards the lockbox that's sitting on his table. He says, any haul that we take, the crew gets 20% of that, and you split it evenly. And you'd be one of 7 as far as the crew goes, each of you, if that's what you're interested in. So that's what we're looking at as far as pay goes. I'd also provide a place to sleep, make sure you have enough food, show you parts of the world, and if you stick around long enough, I'll show you a little bit about, or we will show you a little bit about being a crew of an airship. I will warn you, where we're going, first thing we're doing is getting rid of that black stone. That's where it's going to take a week to get there. And where we're headed is going to be a very rough and dangerous place.
More rough and dangerous than the town we were just in?
Well, here's the thing. The town you were just in, everything in that town wanted to kill you. And you were under no illusions opposite that. Where we're going, there's a good chance that every one that you meet will want to stab you in the back or toss you off the edge of the island. But a lot of them are going to pretend like they don't feel that way. So the illusion that civilization provides it can be more dangerous sometimes.
Sounds interesting.
I got nowhere to be.
We do now?
Fair enough. Well, then, welcome to the Lonely Horizon. Devereaux! Take us to the Song of Iron! And with that, you finish your breakfast with the captain. After you had enough to eat, he steps with you back out onto the deck of the Lonely Horizon, and you can now feel, about a few minutes after he yelled up to Devereaux, you started to hear the creaking of the mast. You started to feel a little bit of a tip in the ship, and then you are now headed, and I think each of you, having looked at the Umbra-like compass, you realize you are not headed in the direction of his home. That was off kind of in the general western direction. You're headed south to wherever this Song of Iron is. You've never heard of it before, though. Well, let's not straight up say you've never heard of it before. Does anybody have a history skill?
I do.
Okay. If you want to make a history check, I can tell you if you've heard of the Song of Iron before.
Yeah, I don't think I got a 6.
I got 11.
Okay. So yeah, you're not heard of this before. It's not something that rings a bell. You step out and you can see the kind of clouds and mist kind of slowly drifting by as the Lonely Horizon. It's hard to not have points of reference. I mean, you have clouds, but those don't move that fast. So getting a sense of how fast you're traveling, there is wind in your face, but not seeing any ground near you. It feels almost surreal, like you're almost suspended in midair and there's just some wind, but you know that you are traveling. And after Captain Fairfax steps out with you, he calls to Hillman and he says, "Hillman, Masters Theric and Avaleth have decided to join us. Show them around, put them to work." And the two of you you see Hillman kind of swings down.
Did your whole crew see me?
You're asking Captain Fairfax on the side.
Mm-hmm.
He says, "No, Master Theric. In fact, your privacy is your own. The only ones of my crew that are aware of your nature are First Mate Devereaux and Hillman. So, Quartermaster Hillman. It's entirely up to you if you wish to maintain that privacy.
Okay.
Though you will find that a number of my crew are unorthodox." And you see, Theric, you see as he's talking to you, when he says unorthodox, you see his eyes dart to one side, and if you follow that gaze, you see the two halfling women working right next to each other. But he glances at them for just a moment as he says unorthodox. But Hillman kind of swings down from the rigging up above, says nothing. Yeah, you see she kind of smiles. She's got that one missing tooth, which again makes her look dangerous more than anything else. And she's a large muscular woman, but she just kind of points at each of you, kind of nods and waves a hand to you and leads you over and starts to show you without really discussing anything. She's not talking. She kind of like points to you, Theric, shows you how some of the rigging works, starts to show you some of the knots and where some of the different booms and arms would be that would allow you to swing the balloon one way or another if called for. But she's just showing you how that mechanism works, and then basically puts you to work with just practicing knots, practicing tying things, making sure that they're secure, and then leads you, again, without a word, Avaleth leads you over to down into the hold, and when you go down the hold that is nearest the captain's quarters, you end up in a mess hall. And then down one more level to the third level of the ship, and you end up in a actual cargo hold. And she points at a couple, basically large bundles of, there's rope that's been tied up into bundles. There's tar, there's hammers, there's nails, there's boards for repair, and she just kind of like hands you a couple things, hands you like a bucket of tar and a hammer and a brush. She picks up a couple things and kind of nods and leads you back up to the deck.
Follow her up.
And starts basically showing you how to perform maintenance on this ship. And that's how that day goes. Number of people that there's, so all in all, throughout the day, you see everybody on the ship. You know that there's Captain Fairfax, First Mate Devereaux, Quartermaster Hillman. You've met the 2 halflings. You've met a half-orc. There's a human that you saw carrying things around. And then at some point, a goblin woman pops out of that middle cannon hold long enough to pop out, walk downstairs to where the mess hall is, and come back holding what looks like a bowl of soup that, as she's carrying it, it's full to the absolute brim, and she's just kind of chucking along without spilling it, and jumps down, like doesn't gingerly get down, just jumps down into the hole with it. Doesn't say a word to anybody, just kind of moves along. But you see she's got, as she moves past you as you're working, you smell just like this combination of like gunpowder, like this acrid black powder, sulfur, but also some, I think, Theric, there's a bit of time where you spent working on magic, that there's different salves and solutions and astringents that there's some magical smell to her as well, as she kind of bops past you and drops down into the cannon hole. Throughout the day, you kind of mingle with the crew. I don't know how friendly you are with them, but you work on maintenance, you work on taking care of the ship. At one point, late in the day, nearing dinner time, there is a large shape off the side of the ship, far away, but it's a large shape in the clouds that kind of moves almost like a fish. You've seen fish swim in the water before from Nova Sona. There's a couple lakes on Nova Sona that you've been to, but you see like a large, huge, bigger than the ship, like a fish swimming through clouds, that shape. And you see those clouds as the fish shape kind of moves through them. You see them kind of turn dark, and you start to hear rumbles of thunder off in the distance. And you see a few of the crew kind of like look over to it and then go back to work as if this is something that they've seen before.
What's that?
So who would you ask?
So you said people, whoever looked over at it, I'm like, what's that?
I'm going to say that you are near the half-orc that you met before. That you interacted with slightly while you stepped out of the room. But he's in the process of kind of winding some rope back around one of the winches on there, on the one of the masts. And he looks over and he says, "It's a thunderhead whale. They're huge beasts. They fly about the world, and they can cause storms, but not always. That one must be in a bad mood. Not usually dangerous to ships and people like us. They eat birds."
I kind of, Thiric's eyes kind of go like, birds? There's birds big enough to fill that belly?
Well, he kind of like laughs and kind of stops what he's doing, leans against the railing. He first checks to make sure that First Mate Devereaux and Quartermaster Hillman are not watching him stop. But he kind of leans against the railing and he says, "Not one bird, but hundreds, thousands of birds. They eat starlings, huge clouds of these things that fly around, and the thunderheads hunt them."
I see.
As you're having that discussion, the human that has been kind of working alongside the half-orc, he says, "I heard that there's an order of monks that ride around on those things, tame them." And you see the half-orc kind of says, "Yeah, I don't know about that. That seems awfully dangerous. I wouldn't want to ride one of those things." The human kind of like laughs. He says, "I'd do it on a bet."
What would the difference be riding one of those and riding this?
The half-orc kind of like looks kind of in the distance at the thing, and he says, "Well, we don't make thunder and lightning. I mean, kind of like glances down at the cannon hole. He goes, unless we mean to. But flying through a lightning cloud is a little dicey. And you see the human pops up. He goes, "Are you talking about dice?" And he says, "No, we're not talking about dice right now. We haven't even had dinner yet." About then, there's a bell that's rung on the lower level of the ship, which you figure, Avaleth, you walk through, that's the mess hall. And you see the crew kind of, most of the crew kind of stop what they're doing, take care of their tools. And, the half-work kind of stretches out, puts his hammer down, kind of looks to each of you, and he says, "I'm Ranford, this is Webb. Let's go get some grub." And says, Theric.
Obelith.
Well, welcome to the crew. And they go down. There's like, the mess is very simple. It's essentially a small kitchen and a couple tables set up. You see a freshly caught deer kind of turning on a spit in the mess, along with some fruits and vegetables that you're like, well, there's only one place they could have really gotten this recently. And in your time on Nova Sona, I think especially you, Avaleth, you would have been aware that the laws of the island are pretty strict as far as like just taking resources. Like it's one thing for people who live there to go hunting, but people who don't live there, especially people who have airships, that's a big no-no. You know that if the Sparrowhawk Brigade was to catch them, even going after a deer on an island this size, an island that is 1,000 miles square, with only one major city on it, the Sparrowhawk Brigade would still have come down on them hard for even poaching a deer. But they're all very happy, smiling, enjoying fresh food. You hear Webb, the human who was like, "Were you talking about dice?" That same guy, he sits. The two of you sit with Ranford and Webb, and well, they usher you over to sit with them, and you hear Webb say, "Yeah, it's nice having landside, getting some fresh food for a change." At which point, you glance over to where the kitchen is and realize the kitchen and the cannon hold must connect somehow, because you didn't notice it at first when you came down. Behind the counter, you're hearing some like bowls and stuff move, and you hear when Webb says it's nice having fresh food for a change. You see this goblin woman head pop up, and she like straight just dead eyes Webb, and she's like, and you hear her in kind of like a slightly higher pitched voice. She's like,
"Are you complaining about the provisions, Master Webb?"
And he's like, oh, sorry, Mom. No, not complaining. Everything is delicious." And she's like,
"That's right."
And she goes back to what she was doing. Webb leans down and like focuses on his food, and Ranford looks to you guys and he goes, "Cilantro is a great cook and quite the fierce powder monkey, but sometimes the food tastes a little bit like sulfur. But don't let her know I said that."
Have anything to do with the placement of the kitchen?
Well, on a ship like this, it's only so big you can only put things in so many places. You notice that the two halfling women are sitting off in a table by themselves in the corner, which is built for people their size, and are kind of jabbering back and forth at each other, again in that language that you don't recognize. They only have meat on their plates. Like, they have skipped vegetables, bread, fruit, all that kind of stuff. It's just meat on their plates. But it's the two of you, the two halflings, the half-orc and the human, and then you see the goblin over there in the corner.
Who are the lovely ladies over there?
Webb. So Ranford goes back to eating. Webb, who seems a little bit more open, the human, he kind of looks over and he goes, "Oh, that's Lonnie and Nani. They're sisters. They're..." And he looks over at Ranford. He goes, "How would you describe them?" And Ranford says, "Creepy as all hell. But stable. Yeah, creepy as all hell. That's a good way to describe them. But they're sisters. Just members of the crew, though.
Any other crew we haven't met?
No, I don't think so. It's the four of us and you two. You're taking place for Wallace and Dearborn. They're gone now. And then there's Hillman, Quartermaster Hillman, First Mate Devereaux, Captain Fairfax, and Cilantro. And you see her head pops up, like she heard her name, and he's like, "Oh, everything's delicious." And she's like, and she goes back to like whatever she was doing behind the counter. So we pick you up in Nova Sona, and Captain tells us that we gotta make a big show of things with the cannons and the anchor. You two of you were down below there in the mix.
Yep.
Well, sounds dangerous. Hopefully whatever it was that you were after will pay off well. I guess we're heading to the Song of Iron, which is going to take a bit to get there, but...
You've been before?
We've been... Webb says, "Oh, I've been there once." Ranford's like, "It was before I joined the crew." And Webb's like, "Yeah, well, I've been there once. It's a right scrappy place. Best to keep your nose down. Great dice games, though. A lot of gambling to be had there. If you're interested in that." He says, "By the way, if you are interested in that, I've got a pair of dice." And he like pulls out some dice, and you hear Ranford go, "Webb, right now, come on." He says, "They just joined the crew." And then he looks at you and he goes, "I was going to say that most people who join the crew are not super well off to start off with, but the two of you look like you got a little bit more coin than most of us when we first stepped foot on the Lonely Horizon." And Webb says, "Yeah, and if you like games of chance, we're happy to maybe play you for some, just to keep things, light and friendly."
I'm game.
Great. And he puts the dice down and he says, we'll play a game. Basically, it's a liar's dice game. He puts one silver piece down, and you see Lonnie and Nani, when they hear the dice rattle, one of them is done eating. You don't know which one is which, by the way. One of them is done eating. You see the other one pick up what looks like a long bone that would have been most likely a deer thigh. It's got almost no meat on it, but it's been cracked in half, and she's kind of like sucking marrow out of the bone. But they come over to stand next to the table and just watch. And you see Ranford, who is still trying to focus on his meal. When they come over to stand and watch, he just kind of like shudders a little bit and like just picks his bowl up and holds it close to his chest and keeps eating. But the two halflings
I pull a gold piece out and I'll be like, "You'll have to take it out of this if you win."
There's a little bit of a heavy silence for a moment, and Webb kind of looks at it and he goes, "So you're a high roller then? Okay, well." He kind of like nudges Ranford and he says, "Maybe that's not the only whale that we see today then, eh?" He says, "All right, let's do this." And he slides a silver piece out for his first die. And Ranford's just shaking his head. You watch the halfling's eyes watch the dice roll around. And like the one just keeps on kind of like almost noisily sucking marrow out of this bone. The other one is a lack of expression on her face. Okay, I'm going to say that you can play with Webb with dice games for a little while. We won't play every handout, but in general. So here's how we'll do this. Let's do a performance check. Okay, so the performance check is going to basically be how the rest of that gambling session goes while everybody finishes their meal. Theric, any conversation that you're having or anything you're doing while this is happening?
I'm just listening.
Okay. So the performance check...
And I'm watching Webb to see if he's palming the dice, trying to...
Give me a perception check. He's got... I rolled a 19, he's got a +2, so that's a 21 on performance.
Yeah, he's got me beat.
Okay.
19.
19. You believe that Webb could, like, you're watching how dexterous his hands move. You think he very well could, but isn't cheating. Like, he could if he wanted to, but his luck seems to be holding out, and Avaleth's is not. So he eventually cleans you out of the full gold piece, but is very friendly about it. Like, he doesn't gloat. He's like, "Oh, you'll get me next time. We can, you know." He says, "We bunk right next door, and our room's a little bit bigger. If you want to, you know, we can play before bed."
Obviously, Grace decided you needed some money.
There's a moment where his face, like, he has to think about who Grace is. You can tell that it's not a common subject for him. And then he goes, "Oh, yeah, Grace, but yeah, good job. You know, love to play again at some point." And then he, like, starts cleaning up his bowl. Everybody kind of takes care of their plates and whatnot. You see Cilantro has climbed up a ladder and into, like, a hidey hole that goes back to the cannon sub-level. And Theric, this is the first time you've been down on this level, on this side of a wall. You see one set of stairs that goes down from here, where you have not been. You've been everywhere in the ship except for down now.
I go down.
Okay. So that is in full view of everybody that's in the mess. There's no, like, door on there. But when you start heading down, you do hear Ranford say, "You going down to the hold, Theric?"
Sure.
All right. Well, just be careful down there. It's awful dark and can be a bit spooky as the night wears on. And as you guys were coming down here, it was starting to get to be dusk. You notice that there is no, like, loose flame anywhere. So there's a few, like, magically glowing things in the mess, but the hold is very dark. You pick your way down into the hold. Avaleth, what are you doing while Theric goes down below?
I'm buddying up with the crew.
Okay. Give me so we're going to say a little bit of time passes while you socialize. Give me a persuasion roll.
19.
Okay. I'll fill you in on what you learn about the crew in just a little bit. Theric, you pick your way down into the hold, which is a darkened area, kind of wide, and a little bit of wind whistles. There's a few crates and boxes stacked up down here. It doesn't look like the crew has had a large payday recently, so this is mostly supplies, maintenance supplies that are stacked up down here. But this is where, if they did have a large haul, this is where it would be. And what would you like to do while you're down there?
If it's supplies, I mean, I just was wondering what was down there. I just look around real quick.
Okay. Do you want to give me, like, an investigation check? If you're
Sure.
looking around?
Nat 20.
Nat 20. Well, on a nat 20, two things. First thing you notice is there is a whistle of wind towards the back of the ship, and you realize that the entire back of the hull, or the hold, is a ramp with a mechanism that would allow it to fold down. So, theoretically, if this ship was to touch ground, you could roll almost an entire wagon into this ship on this level. The other thing you realize is that the hold is not as long as the ship, and there's no other way down. You've been in every part of this ship now, and this hold is only half as long as the ship. So there is a space on the other side of a wall, and kind of below all of the crew quarters, that you don't know what it is or how to get there. But you know that there's...
And I don't see, like, a secret door out in the wall or anything.
On a nat 20 investigation, honestly, I think if you move over, do you have any ability to light down here? And will you light?
I have my canary lantern.
Okay, so you open the shutter on the canary lantern. On a nat 20, you start looking along the wall, and it is expertly hidden. And you notice that there are even some maybe traces of magic that are making this slightly harder to find, but there is a door in that wall.
Smuggler's cash.
You're not sure what's on the other side of the door or how to open it. Like, you don't see a handle, you don't see hinges. But after a bit, you find the edges, the tracings of a door that it could open. You're just not sure exactly how.
Okay. I go back upstairs.
Okay. I think that evening, as the evening starts to come and people there are crew that kind of maintain a nighttime routine, but this being your first day, you're not expected to do that. Eventually, you head back to your room. You hung out with the crew for a little while. Aboleth, and then Aboleth and Theric, you end up in your quarters together. You found out a couple things. You found out that Lonnie and Nani, and this is Ranford was the one that told you, but Lonnie and Nani, the halflings, were from an island that had never been contacted before. It was an island that hadn't figured out how to fly yet, that didn't use thunderheads or balloons or gliders, had no idea about Umbrelite. They were a savage race of halflings, cannibals, that lived on this island. And when the Lonely Horizon touched down there, there was a job to go to this a relic of the first people, the first folk, and the story goes that Devereaux and Hillman, along with Ranford and Wallace, and Ranford's the one telling this, so it's his story. Wallace is dead, and Devereaux and Hillman are not in this conversation when you were hanging out with them. The officers don't hang out with the crew. But Ranford says that at some point Devereaux got shot in the gut with a spear, like a gun, a trap that launched a spear out and hit him in the gut. And that Hillman ended up carrying Devereaux while Ranford and Wallace were carrying boxes out of this relic, and they ended up being chased by this tribe of cannibal halflings back to the ship. They made a hot exit, got away from this island as quickly as they could, and then found out that Lonnie and Nani had stowed away on the ship, had gotten into the ship and were like hiding out in the hold. And basically, Captain Fairfax made a decision he was either going to take them back and drop them off, but there was somehow, and this is where Ranford gets a little bit fuzzy on it. He doesn't know how the conversation started because they didn't speak any common at that time, but Captain Fairfax talked to them and they joined the crew and have been working as crew members since, and that they're very nimble, they're very good at getting in and out of tight spots, they're very good at hiding and sneaking around, and he's explained to them that cannibalism is not not an acceptable practice on the ship.
Well, that's good.
But yeah, they had no interest. The Lonnie and Nani apparently had no interest, from what they've been told, what Ranford has been understood to know about going back to their island. That once they realized that there was more to the world than their island, they wanted to see all of it. So that's what you learned about Lonnie and Nani. Cilantro was here well before Ranford. Webb was here before Ranford. You know that Dearborn, which is one of the people that you took their room, used to do a lot of dice games with Webb, and they were friends.
Yeah, I offer my condolences to their lost friends as well.
Yeah, they kind of... You get this impression that no one is like close or family on this ship. They're friendly, but it's a dangerous life, and it happens. I think you probably hear a few stories about going onto this island or that, and trying to recover a relic, or trying to fill a couple barrels with fresh water and being chased away and that kind of stuff. And you get the impression that they live a life of freedom, but also a little bit of hardship because they don't align themselves with any one island, and they just kind of live on the wind, which seems to work well for most of them. You know, like they're not like, you don't get any complaints from the crew, but you get the impression that there have been times where, you know, things are a little bit tight, where the belt's a little bit tight and they have to stretch to make things work. But yeah, they're definitely, the ship is itself. You spend enough time on the ship too. The ship is a wonder. It is well maintained. But this is not as large as a lot of the ships that you saw in the port at Nova Sona. This is more of a small sloop with 9 or 10 people on it that are just kind of making their way, you know, doing what they can to survive. There were military ships in Nova Sona that were full-blown galleons with 50, 60, 100 people that could crew them.
The type of ship that I would have served on?
You would have been transported on a galleon. You didn't serve on a ship. But you were transported on a galleon, which would have had, like I say, between 50 to 100 people crewed on there. So this is a small ship in comparison. But it might be faster and more maneuverable, too.
Noted.
As your first evening ends on the Lonely Horizon, you bunk down in the your quarters. Theric, was there any conversation about what you found in the hold with Avaleth?
I'll tell him about the door. Did you realize? Have you been down there?
Not.
You did.
Oh.
Quartermaster Hillman took you down there to pick up
right.
supplies.
I did go down there.
But you weren't really looking around, you were just following directions at the time.
It was pretty dark down there.
Did you realize there's a secret door down there?
I did not.
I said secret door.
Not secret anymore, I guess.
Crazy.
Did you take a look?
I didn't open the door, no. I didn't see a way to open it, and I wasn't going to look right now. Thought if I took too long down there, somebody might wonder where I was going and come looking for me. Being the new guy and all. Why, you want to go bust into it? I don't have my crowbar
Not
anymore.
Particularly, no.
So we'd have to use my hammer, and that'd be loud.
So with that, as you lay in your hammocks, you hear the creak and the drift of the Lonely Horizon surrounding you, the whistle of wind as it pushes past the outer hull, and the occasional mumbles and a bit of chatter from the crew. You bed down for that evening. Sleep overtakes you, and you both realize for the first time in a while that you have a home of your choosing, not one that you were kind of left with or stuck with, and you sail into the night. This has been Gen XP. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week.